Hello, welcome back to the final episode of Joe's Arcade. And I don't have that much else to say other than all the modeling's done, and we got a special treat, which is Joe being right here to kind of take the mic and give us a tour of the arcade. So here's Joe.
Hi, everybody. This is Joe of Joe's Arcade. Yes, the Joe. And just want to thank Eric and actually another guy, Sean Newton, aka Gozer, who did these models. So when you come to my arcade, the first thing you see, you're coming down the stairs. This is a basement arcade. Is you see the door to enter the game room, and there's two things there: the flag in the background, and then the history cards. The flag is just a flag, but one thing I always found interesting about it is that it's a 49-star flag. Those were only used for a few months, and so I'm not saying it's really rare or valuable, but it's not the most common thing to see. One other question I got during my game parties is that people would ask me, "Hey, where'd you get this game? When did you get it?" etc., etc. And each of those cards represents all the games in the game room and gives a history: when I got it, where I got it, how I got it, how I transported it home, what was the deal, etc., etc. So from there, we still haven't entered the room yet, but to the left here, just to the left of the game room on the outside, is a game called Trap Shoot Classic. It's a wall game you play by remote control, and I affectionately refer to that game as Waiting for the Can game because on the opposite side of that wall, not inside the game room, but on the other side, is the bathroom. And so if you're waiting to use the bathroom, you can play a game with somebody, and while you're talking to them, so I call it the Waiting for the Can. Safecracker sitting on the outside, and the whole premise of this request to Eric to model my game room was to so I could rearrange my games virtually rather than have them do it physically. Way easier. And Safecracker is a game I do want to get into the game room. And as you see the game room, you'll see why I need to do this virtually first. All right, so back to entering the game room, and the door is open. Now, in my game room, I kind of focused it originally on my favorite game. As soon as you enter the game room, the first game you see straight ahead is Missile Command. My favorite game, very difficult game, really doesn't get a lot of game play at game parties because it's so hard, but it's my favorite game. It's staying forever. And then from there, I kind of spread out on both sides with games I like next. Major Havoc, Rampart. Rampart is might be my only simultaneous player game, and three people can play it at the same time. Great game. iRobot, Food Fight, and then keep going over to Quantum, Journey, Aka R, a prototype. Only 5 of them were ever made. Only 3 of them were known, so that was a hard game to find. Tempest, and then we hit the wall. So panning out toward the wall, some artwork that's kind of special to me. Uh, Joe is cool, a guy. Sounds like bad English, but it was a kind of a special gift from my best friend, best man at my wedding, and it's a history I don't need to get in here, but it's a special thing to me. To the right, my favorite picture of all time. I'm scuba diving in the Cayman Islands, and that's a stingray on my shoulder. And then some other things that are special to me. Just above me is a picture of my wife in college. And now let's go back toward the games. Star Trek, Next Generation Pinball, Monster Bash, Wizard of Oz, Emerald City Limited Edition, a model, Revenge from Mars, best pinball game ever made. I know the pinball people will disagree with me, but it's my favorite pinball game. Attack from Mars, Circus Voltaire, and Tales of the Arabian Nights. From there, we get back to the door, so we've kind of scanned around that part of the room. Some things that are kind of like interesting, special to me here. The popcorn popper, that people love that, and so it's not a game. It gets the most use of anything in the game. And if you'll notice, just above the popcorn popper is a clock, and that is an office clock. It's a two-sided clock. I worked at a location that was rehabbing a floor, and this clock was in the garbage. 30 seconds after I saw the clock in the garbage, it was in my car, and I got it mounted in my game room. I love the two-sided clock. Scanning to the right here. So then Babe Ruth, somehow I picked up a cutout of the best baseball player ever. I had to put him back up in the back of the door. And there on the between Babe Ruth and the popcorn machine is a drinking fountain. A lot of people have water fountains or they have uh, water coolers. This is a real drinking fountain attached to the water main. I really like that. And a piece of artwork there at my retirement party from AT&T. a friend of mine whose husband did a lot of artwork made that sign for me. He knew it was my favorite game, and he kind of made a custom-made sign. Now to the right, we have a pretty tight, crowded corner. We have a freezer there, and compared to the other side of the room, I have games in the middle aisle here. It really gets crowded and tight here. But if we go back in on the games here, going toward Marble Madness. Oh, Marble Madness. I have two games in my game room that are simultaneous play. Rampart and Marble Madness. Great game. Agent X. Agent X was remade as Cloak and Dagger for the movie. The Hollywood contacted Atari and asked them for a game to support their movie, which turned out to be this game, Agent X. It was rebranded Cloak and Dagger for the Cloak and Dagger movie released in the 1980s. There were 7 Agent X's made, and obviously all prototypes. I was lucky enough to be able to track one down. Next to that is just a file cabinet, but it's got all the manuals for all my games and many, many more. And to the right, going is Turkey Shoot, a great shooting game. I'm not really into shooting games. I almost don't even consider this a shooting game, but I guess it is. There is a gun there. It's a fun game. It's a funny game. A lot of good stuff. And back in the corner there, starting the row of games, we have Millipede, Bubbles, Wacko. Can you get a better shot of Wacko there? There. The control panel and the sign being angled. I knew nothing about this game, and I saw the cabinet. I said, I got to get this game. This is just so crazy. It turns out to be a really good game, challenging game. I like it a lot. To the right, we have Blaster in the very rare wood cabinet dedicated. Blaster came in 3 different types of cabinets: the dedicated wood cabinet, the Duramold, and the conversion cabinet. This is the dedicated wood cabinet, and pretty tough game to find. To the right of that, Black Widow, and then we have Missile Command. So that goes around the perimeter of the room. A couple games I want to show you that are in the middle. One of them, Mazer Blazer. You can get down to the controls there. Very unusual, unique controls. They hang down from the upper side of the game, and as you move the controls left, right, up and down, the gun inside the game moves up, down, left, and right. Not a very common game to find. It really not highly collectible. Collectors don't seem to like it. I think it's a great game. And then turning around to the last game for the in the room to talk about is Q*bert. Keep going around. And this is a standard Q*bert cabinet. Now, in the, it's not a repository. What is it called? The warehouse. The warehouse has the regular marquee. There is the more rare swearing marquee, which I have. And then I had a friend make me a multi-PCB. It's not a multi-game. There are 2 separate PCBs in here, one for Q*bert, one for Q*bert's Cubes, and we did an add-on to the wiring harness. So up at the top there you could see switch games here, that arrow with the hand, and there's just a button there, and you can press it and switch games from Q*bert to Q*bert's Cubes, and the power gets routed to the other PCB. So that is pretty much my game room. The whole premise of this request to Eric to model this game room was so I could virtually rearrange games rather than physically. And as you'll see, I want to get Safecracker in here, and I have to figure out a way to do it. Right now it's looking like the freezer might be the first thing to go. But that's pretty much it. I really appreciate Eric doing 26, well, this is the 27th and final episode of this game room. He took it way beyond and above what I ever imagined. It turned out fantastic. And the 2 people I'd like to just thank endlessly, Eric for doing this whole game room, and Sean Newton, who did 99% of the models. Maybe 1 or 2 of the games in here were not modeled by him. And actually, at least a half dozen of them were my measurements that I gave to Sean. I had to talk him into doing for me, and he was nice enough to be willing to add those to the repository. But he made over 500 models. And so he's a professional. And as far as I'm concerned, Eric, who did this, is also professional. Thanks, you guys. That's it. Hopefully you can attend one of my parties in the future. Thanks.
Awesome.